Salve omnes. It's Magister Hodges for Forsyth Virtual Academy's Latin 2 course. This is week 2. This is week 2's review of present and imperfect tense verbs. Sorry, I'm coming in a little late on a Wednesday of the week. Hopefully next week we'll be right on time and not experiencing the same issues I was last week. So I'm hoping to get caught up and everything graded. Thank you to everybody who's been staying up to date on all this stuff and being proactive and communicating with me. I really appreciate it. And I apologize again for just kind of the sporadic way in which things are being posted. I promise until I get this straightened out, I will be as flexible as I can be with the grading and all of that. And so if you have an issue, please don't hesitate to reach out to me on It's Learning. But enough about that. Let's talk about verbs. So this is a review. This is trying to cover everything we did in Latin 1. We're going to talk about present and imperfect tense verbs this week. And next week, we'll talk about perfect tense verbs and kind of how that works. For the people who were in my class last year, like I said last week, we're working from a different textbook. And so this presentation may cover some things that are going to fill in some gaps of things that we didn't learn last year. Because I did not focus that much on the hardcore grammatical aspects of Latin in interest of covering more vocabulary. This textbook does things a little differently. And honestly, I think it's probably a good time for you guys to know the full basics of the technical stuff that's going on. So let's get going. All right, so before you begin, pause this video. If you're following along with the presentation on Google Slides, please follow this link and take the present and imperfect verb pre-quiz. You will also see a link to this if you're on Google Classroom. It's a Google Forms quiz. It is ungraded. It is just for me to see where y'all are at before you even look at this. So it is important that you guys just look at this so you have an idea of what you're going to be asked about and get a good sense of what you know and what you don't know. So if you haven't done this yet, hit pause, come back afterwards. Great. All right, so in this presentation, we're gonna talk about a few different things. I've broken them down into can-do statements. I know it seems very elementary, but this is something I'm gonna try this year to try and focus everybody on the things that we need to know. So we're gonna cover a couple things. That you'll be able to tell the difference between a present and imperfect tense verb in Latin. What does it look like? How is it translated? That you can correctly identify the subject of a sentence by looking at the ending of a verb. That you can correctly translate a verb based on its tense, person, and number, whether it is, first, second, or third person, singular, plural, present, imperfect tense. That you can identify the conjugation of a verb based on the endings of its first two principal parts. This is definitely something my students from last year had no practice in, which is totally fine. It's not a very complex concept, and it's nothing to stress about, but it is going to be new information for a lot of you. And that you understand the function of a verb's first two principal parts. Once again, this is something that my class last year did not really focus on a lot. So if you're from Hodges Latin 1, that'll be new information as well. So let's get going. Let's start with some important terms. Person, number, and tense. There's a couple more that are important down the road, but we're going to focus on these for now. So person describes whether the subject is I, you, he, she, it, or a name, we, y'all, or they, or a bunch of names. And we use the terms first, second, and third person to describe these. First person, a first person verb, that means its subject, the person doing the action, is I or we. Second person means you or y'all. Third person means he, she, or it, a name, or they. So that's the person. Let's talk about number. Now, we said first, second, third. Those are numbers, but that's not what we're talking about when we talk about a verb's number. Number just means whether it's singular or plural. Is one person doing it or a bunch? And that's basically it. So when we're describing a verb, I may say the first person singular. First person singular means I. Or I may say first person plural. First person plural means we. So over here on the side, on the y-axis, we got first, second, third person. And on the X, we got singular and plural. And so that's how this all breaks down. Having a good idea of what I'm saying when I say second person singular, you're like, oh, that's you. Oh, first person is I. Third person plural is they. You want to have that understanding in your head because that will be the terminology that we use. And then lastly, there's tense, which is not covered in this box down here. Tense just tells you when the verb is happening. The simple terms we use for that are past, present, and future, but in terms of grammar, there are some subdivisions within those three general categories. Today, we're going to be talking about the present, and we're going to be talking about the imperfect, which is a flavor of the past tense. It's a certain type of past tense. Oops, sorry about that. Okay, so let's move on. Latin shows the person, number, and tense of a verb by changing its ending. So let's look at what that means. Let's look at this verb right here, amo, amare, which means to love. So first thing, this will be new for my Latin 2 or my Latin 1 students from last year. You are being given what is called the infinitive form. You'll see it here is the second part of the verb that we're going to talk about later. But basically, if you see a verb that ends with re instead of the other endings that we've learned about, re just means to blank. And we're going to talk about more later. So amare means to love. Now, if you look down here, this is how amare changes if there is a subject attached to it, if there's someone doing it. The endings are o, s, t, mus, tis, nt. And I do that in first, second, third person singular, first, second, and third plural. So amo is I love. Amas is you love. Amat is he, she, or it loves. Amamus, we love. Amatis, y'all love. Amant, they love. These are the general verb endings in the present tense. And so if I am the subject, first person singular is O. If you is the subject, S will be the ending of the verb. If he, she, or it, or a name, a singular name, is the subject of the sentence, then the verb will end with T. If it's we, the verb will end with mus. If the subject is y'all, the verb will end with tis. And if the subject is they, or a bunch of names, or a plural word, then it'll end with inti or nt. Here's another example, same thing, a different verb, debeo, debere, which means to owe or ought to. So the infinitive form is debere. That sounded bad. Debere, which means to owe. Remember, if it has the re, it's going to mean to blank. So debeo, debes, debet, debemus, debetis, debent. I owe, you owe, he owes. We owe, y'all owe, they owe. So you see, even though the verb's different, the endings are the same when the subject is, if the subject is I with amo, if the subject is I with love, it'll be amo. If the subject is I with o or debeo, it'll be debeo. And that's just how that works. So these are the endings you want to keep in mind. Hopefully this is familiar to you. If it's not, I have other videos at the end of this presentation done by Magister Johnson online, the Latin tutorial channel, that goes into a little bit more depth. But for now, we're just going to move on from these. So, all right, so here's some sentences. Ego canem meam amo. I love my dog. Tu canem tuam amas. You love your dog. Is canem suam amat. He loves his dog. Nos canem nostram amamus. We love our dog. Vos canem vestram amatis. Y'all love your dog. Ei canem suam amant. They love their dog. Okay, so you notice here I've highlighted in red all the subjects here, and I've also highlighted in red or colored red the endings that go with those subjects. Now that leads us to an interesting thing about the subject. If you cover up ego, tu, is, nos, vos, and ei, and you just look at the endings of the verbs, you will actually realize that you don't even need a subject most of the time, and Romans often left it off. As we get into more complex work, you'll have a sentence without a nominative noun. And so how do you figure out who's doing it? Well, typically you'll look at the end of the sentence and look at the ending of the verb, and that will tell you whether it's I, you, he, she, it, we, y'all, or they. So you don't really need it, and so you'll see these sentences all mean the same thing as when ego, tu, or well, I love my dog, canem meam amo means the same thing as ego canem meam amo. So you don't really need a subject unless you're giving the subject of the sentence a name or it's a nominative noun. So for example, I could say canem suam amat, and that means he loves his dog or she loves her dog. But if I change it to Bill canem suam amat, that means Bill loves his dog. And the same thing down here. Canem suam amant ends with nt, so we know it's they love their dog. If I wanted to change it to puelai canem suam amant, that would mean the girls love their dog. So that's one time that you'll definitely see a subject. You can also see ego or tu or nos or vos in actual Latin. You would only really see those if they were really trying to emphasize it. If it's like, I own this house, it would be ego habeo Willam Hunk. Right? You really want to emphasize that I do it. Or you did this. Tu est stultus. You are stupid. Said non stulti sunt. Sunt calidi. Y'all are smart. So anyway, I'm going to move on because I think I just called y'all stupid. My bad. It's not true. Okay, so let's talk about those infinitives again. Here are all the verbs here with re on the end of them. So that's going to mean to blank, whatever it means. So if I want to say, I love to see my dog, I'll say, amo vedere. I love to see canem meam. You love, canem tuam vocare amas. You love to call your dog. He loves to chase his dog. Amat, canem suam agitare amat. Amat, he loves agitare, to chase, canem suam, his dog. Amamus salutare canem nostrum. You notice I'm kind of going backwards. I'm kind of putting this in the English word order as I do it. I should not be doing that. That's not good practice. Canem nostrum salutare amamus. We love to greet our dog. Y'all love to play with your dog will be canem vestram ludere amatis. Y'all love to play. And then, and then lastly, canem suam dicere amant. They love to talk to their dog. The nt means they, dicere, to speak. So you're going to start to see these more in Latin. And like I said, my Latin ones last year, we did not see a lot of infinitives, if any. And if we did, I just told you what they meant. So that's what that means. And you can identify them by the RE at the end. You'll notice some of them are ERE and some of them are ARE. And that'll be important later, but it's not incredibly important right now. If you remember that if a verb ends with RE, that means to blank, and it's called the infinitive form. Okay, so now that we've talked about person and number in the present tense, let's talk about how we change tenses. All the verbs we just reviewed are present, meaning that they're happening now. I love, it could also be I am loving or I do love. Those are three valid ways to translate a present tense verb. All of those are technically right. For the purpose of quizzes and things like that, we're probably going to just stick with this first version. So if I say amant, that means he loves on the quiz, just to keep it simple. He is loving is also technically is an acceptable translation. So he does love is also acceptable. We're going to also be looking at the imperfect tense this week, which I said is a flavor of the past tense. Imperfect tense verbs show a continuous or ongoing action in the past, and they're typically translated like these examples in English right here. If I want to say he was loving, I would say amabat. That would be the Latin imperfect of the word love. And I'll show you how to show that in a minute, but it's typically translated as was or were blanking. Okay. You could also say used to blank or kept on blanking. They're less common, but they're still useful, and I'll show you where it becomes useful in the next slide. So let's see what those look like in Latin, because in English we know imperfect means was or were blanking. Okay, so here's the same word, amo amare. Ooh, I'm going to move my little thing here so you guys can see my awesome little cartoon. You'll notice the difference here is the endings. Amabam, amabas, amabat, amabamus, amabatis, amabant. Outside of this M at the beginning, you'll still see the st, mustis, unt, but before that, you'll notice that there is a ba. That's why I have the imperfect sheep go ba, ba, ba. If a verb is if it has a BA as an infix is like a suffix or a prefix, but it occurs in the word, then that means, oh snap. Sorry, I wanted to pause it for that announcement, my bad. Okay, so if you see the infix ba, that means it's imperfect. And if it's imperfect, that means was or were blanking. That's what that is going to mean. Yeah, and so that's that for this word right here. Same thing with debere. I'm going to move this up here now. The infinitive form is still debere, meaning to owe. That doesn't have a tense. It'll always be debere. Well, I say that. It'll change, but later. We'll worry about different tenses of infinitives down the road. We're not going to worry about that right now. One moment. All right, sorry about that. Don't remember where I left off. I had to leave the room for a second, but you'll see here, debebam, debebas, debebat. The endings are the same as they were for amat. But here I translated them as used to owe, and I have this note down here. This could have been was owing, but that just sounds weird, so I said used to. So take a second, examine this. In part 2, we're going to talk about principal parts and conjugations. Walete.